I'm actually going to take this one down because I've got the...
And Rick was supposed to come too. That would have been interesting if he comes. That is. Rick is a board member of the Freedom Conservative Party.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
said
see.
he was going to come tonight. I'll shoot him a message on Rick Johnson. Rick Johnson. Oh, I'll just fucking search him. I think Rick Johnson.
Okay, I will mute myself.
Sounds good. Oh, hey, Peter. There he is. All right. Well, now that Peter's in here, I guess we can get started. So, just to quickly introduce Mr. Downing here, he's the leader of the Wexit party, the Wexit Wexit Canada, and he's also been the founder of Wexit Alberta, Wexit Saskatchewan, and he's here today to basically go over some of the things that Wexit is excited to do. I just heard that Wexit Sask is now a registered party, so congratulations on that, Peter. And yeah, I mean, I'll keep my introduction short, and I think I'll just let Peter take it from here. Go ahead, man. Oh, might be having audio issues. So, Peter, we're not able to hear you right now. So if you go to your voice setting, your user settings, is he Tony? Oh, Tony's not here. Well, Tony can't hear me. Yeah. So Peter, Tony just told me you're on PC. So on PC, you're gonna want to go to the user settings in the bottom left, and once you go there, it's the user settings is that little gear, by the way, that's right beside the headphones. If you click on that, then oh, he just left. Tony, do you want to explain to him over the phone how to deal with the user setting? You know how to do that, right? He has to go to user settings and then go to voice and video and then set his input device. Pretty sure that's what's wrong. You should ask him if he's using a headset, what kind of headset, blah blah blah. And yeah, this is why I was hoping to talk to him and get him set up and do a voice check before we started because this is the I've had this problem before.
Oh, that's... Why hasn't it? Oh my goodness.
Oh, perfect. Hey, Peter. Yeah, so if you want to try that again, hopefully it'll work out this time. You're muted right now, by the way. I'm assuming you probably know that. And yeah, if just to unmute you, I'll have to hit that little microphone button. Should be on the left-hand side there. Okay. So
Mhm.
yeah, there we are. Hey, Peter.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. We can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm just going to leave it like this because I tried to go back to the screen, but you guys can hear me now?
Yeah, you got it
Okay, then let's just go from here.
for sure. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead and take the floor, Peter.
Okay, thanks for the patience. One of my skills is not, I repeat, not technical capabilities. So you're going to hear my kids in the background. So we'll have to deal with that. But yeah, thank you for having me on tonight. Thank you for being interested in obviously something that's very important, I think, to all of us. And I look forward to firing away to answering any questions you have. Um, Anything that comes out of my mouth is you may not agree with it, but it's definitely my perspective or my opinion on the situation. So look forward to your questions.
Awesome. And so, did you just want to kind of give maybe a brief overlay of what Wexit's been doing and the achievements you guys have had lately?
Yeah, for sure. So everybody knows that since January 10th, we got our eligibility from Elections Canada to be registered as a federal political party. So at the federal level, there's if um, Presidente or King Trudeau allows us to have an election again, Wexit Canada will be on the ballot. At the provincial level, a lot of hard work. Wexit, Saskatchewan, we just got registered a week or two ago, and they're in an election year, so that's a big achievement. We had to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get that done. The provincial government had changed the rules, and it was going to basically set us back one whole year. We didn't get our signatures in time, so we had to pull double duty, and we had people from both Alberta and Saskatchewan making it happen. And then in Alberta, we've been working. We've been in talks for a long time, on and off. But most recently, we've been in talks with the Freedom Conservative Party. They actually were a separatist party that started. They were, I think, the Western Independence Party. They started up years and years ago. So we've been talking with them. We're very, very close to a merger between the two of us. I can't officially announce that just yet. But once we sign on the dotted line, then you'll hear an announcement from us, which will be great because then we'll have a very well structured independence party in Alberta that you can vote for in the next election or by-election, and it's going to be fantastic. And hopefully we'll see some MLAs cross the floor. We'll see some members of parliament cross the floor. So because the people who are in politics for the right reasons are not. I mean, they simply cannot be happy with the situation. Watching our industries be shut down, watching the erosion of freedom. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I'm in my late 30s. I've never seen anything like this in my life. We've always kind of half joked or kind of been half serious about Canada becoming like Venezuela, but we're seeing it. I've never seen lineups for food. This is crazy.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. It's absolutely nuts. I mean, one of the opening questions I think I'd have for you is what's your opinion on the Emergencies Act, and what's your opinion on what steps the government should take, if not the Emergencies Act?
Yeah, it's okay. So first part of that question is, in my opinion, it's a total overreach. If the vested interest is making sure to reduce the death count and to not overload our medical systems, the first thing that again we need to be doing is isolating, self-isolating, social distancing from the people who are actually vulnerable, seniors and people with compromised immune systems. But the way that we would be dealing with it, if you look at not just the United States, and ironically enough, just a second, guys, you're being too loud. So they get louder. Um, and ironically, China, but other countries like Jordan, Israel, and Italy now have been running trials and been using hydroxychloroquine for people who are ICU patients, and the treatment results have been fantastic. The recommendations from doctors and physicians has been very impressive. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the U.S. has even said tentatively, yeah, it's looking good. And that's the way we need to be going. The way that we would deal with it, simply put, is put a priority on validating the drug. And then if it's validated, order 40 million doses of it. At $8 a dose, it's $320 million. It's not a lot of money overall. And and not shut down our economy, not shut down our country, and not give Justin Trudeau powers of a dictator. That's how we would deal with it.
Perfect. And so I have another question from Ken here. He says, how will federal MPs exert any power in the House of Commons that has over 200 MPs in a 338 seat count for coming from the East?
Yeah, 338 seats total. So
Yeah.
in the West, we have 104 seats in the four Western provinces. That's actually more than Quebec. Quebec only has 78. Ontario would still be number one with 121. But this situation perfectly. If we had members of parliament, and again, we expect we're going to do very well in the next election. The Reform Party, we expect to have similar, if not better, results than the Reform Party in the 1980s and 1990s. They weren't too far away from, I think they were either at official opposition or not too far away from it at one point. So this situation right now, where we would be able to have members of parliament, number one, who are able to report the facts back to Western Canadians, to stand up for Western Canada the same way the Bloc Québécois, what they do for Quebec, and obviously we see the privilege that Quebec has in this country. Making sure that Justin Trudeau doesn't get dictatorial powers, absolutely. More importantly, I should say more importantly, but over the long term is making sure Western Canadian issues are at the national forefront so that we can't be ignored. I remember growing up, I grew up in Ontario, and I didn't know anything about the Parti Québécois, but I knew a whole lot about Quebec separatism because of the Bloc Québécois, because they had the federal politicians in Ottawa consistently, whenever it was their time to talk, consistently pressing issues about Quebec. And the only way for the feds to know that we're serious is by electing separatist politicians, both federally and provincially. We say, the analogy we use is our federal side is like a shield. We push back against the government, whereas our provincial side is like a sword advancing towards the referendum on separation.
So I have another question here. Canada says, what is Wexit's stance on immigration, just generally?
Well, generally is our first tenet is economic freedom. So when we unlock the $20 trillion of natural resources that we even just have alone in Alberta, let alone the trillions of dollars of natural resources we have in Saskatchewan and other provinces, industry booms, requires more workers. And as a result, if we don't have the workers here, then we've got the ability, we'll have the need for immigration. And then from our perspective, that's always where the need, is and should be. Humanitarian cases of real, and I mean real, like refugee, like if you're coming from a country where you're going to be killed for your skin color or for your religion or for, your life choice or whatever it is, whatever's on protected grounds. We got no problem with. We have a huge problem with mass migration. We have a huge problem with illegal immigration, which obviously the Trudeau Liberals have exacerbated, and the federal Conservatives have basically gone along with to make sure that they don't come across as racist. My parents are immigrants from England. My wife's an immigrant from the Philippines. Our kids are mixed race, and we have to be able to stand up and say, very, very clearly, when this, and usually comes from the political left, we get accused of racism for wanting to maintain our border integrity. And I would just say, why you call me a racist? Because I'm white. Because if it was a different color, you wouldn't call me that. We'd just be having a discussion on immigration policy. And our perspective is immigration should be definitely tied to economics. And we should be bringing people allowing people into our country and choosing who we bring into our country based on what's best for our country. You could be pink, blue, purple, polka dot, green. Really wouldn't matter. Your religion doesn't matter. It's a matter, do you have the skill set to contribute to make Canada a better place, or Western Canada a better place?
Awesome. And Kettle has a great question here. He says, what are your thoughts on how the current crisis will impact the timeline for separation? Do you think that the looming economic crisis will drive people towards the government handouts, or will it open people's eyes to separation?
Oh, 100%. In Western Canada and Alberta foremost, and in Saskatchewan a close second, 100%. When the separation movement really blew up, when Justin Trudeau got reelected, and when we saw that obviously our votes in Western Canada didn't mean anything, especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan, is that movement blew up. He didn't even win the popular vote, and now you've got Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives even willing to give this guy the powers of the Emergency Measures Act. And again, the question is, do you want to wait in line for food? Do you want to wait in line for groceries? Do you want the government telling you how many people can congregate at any given time? Do you want the government, and what Trudeau's going for right now, access to cell phone data to know where you are at any given time so they can quote unquote enforce their social distancing? Or do you, or like me, when I look across the border and I look at the United States, who's pushing to validate the cure for COVID-19, and they're pushing to get their economy up and running within 15 days. I want that. I want freedom. And the majority of people here do too. And not just the people here, but also industry. So agriculture, and the three pillars of any society that are needed to be strong is your agriculture, your energy, and your military. And I speak a lot with folks from all three of those industries, and they are not happy with the current situation under Justin Trudeau. Separation is going to happen. And the reality is, if you try to shut Alberta down, Alberta will leave, and if Alberta leaves, Saskatchewan will leave. And then it'll just be a matter of time for BC and Manitoba.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that too. It's going to be a domino effect. Ken has another good question here. He says, is it your intention to pursue the Clarity Act in order to gain independence?
Well, I think there's a lady in Alberta right now. Her name's Donna Ferroli, and she's pursuing a federal lawsuit, claiming that Canada never really confederated, and basically looking for the legal grounds or loopholes or whatnot that we wouldn't have to, that we would have the ability to separate on our own. Certain scholars, even former members of Parliament, over the course of the 20th century, have pointed out that Canada never really confederated properly. So the approach that we would take is, upon winning government, devoting, and be part of our platform and be open about it, it wouldn't be a secret, and we've said this publicly, is devoting the resources of the government to really look at these legal questions and to get a sense of, maybe it's not a referendum about leaving Canada, maybe legally we would need a referendum to stay a part of Canada or to confederate. So the point is, we would want to use the resources of government to look at these legal questions, and if the grounds exist, I mean, yeah, why would we pursue a referendum and Clarity Act? I mean, why would we want to give home team advantage to the home team referee? It doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind. But what we do have to pursue, though, is we have to pursue legitimacy in the eyes of the international community. And I'm not talking about the United Nations. I'm talking about individual countries. We need to have trading partners, and they need to look at it. Those countries will need to look at us as a legitimate sovereign state or republic if they're going to start doing business with us on a one-to-one basis. So it doesn't have to necessarily go into, let's jump in bed with the United Nations, obviously, which we are strongly against eroding our sovereignty to any organization. Obviously, one of the big planks, one of our three main principles, and it's our Constitution, is local sovereignty. We need to be making the decisions here ourselves. So I hope that explains. But if that doesn't fully answer the question, let me know, and I'll say whatever, or answer it in a different way, or maybe focus on another specific.
Oh, no worries. I think that was definitely sufficient. I actually have another question to kind of tie off that. You're obviously talking about making relationships with the individual countries in order to gain legitimacy. So I have a more specific question in terms of what do you picture Wexit's relationship, if you were to get in power, with Donald Trump's United States of America?
So we have, for quite some time, it's not a secret, we've been talking with folks in both business, industry, politics, with folks from countries like the United States, with India. The reality is to be able to govern, and our big push, to make it clear right now, while we're not in power, is for the governments of Saskatchewan and Alberta. And again, when I say the West, I say those two in particular because it's just a little bit further along. It's not meant to leave out BC and Manitoba. We just have to address them at a different time. But what we need to have done is we need to have our own police, our own taxation, our own immigration, our own firearms administration, our own pension administration. Because if we were to separate, we need to have our own public service in place. We can't just separate and be like, oh, now we're going to build all that stuff afterwards. That would be chaotic. So, by the same token, we need to be having these discussions with, with folks inside Canada, inside Alberta, inside Saskatchewan, inside the rest of Canada, and internationally, so that we have trade relationships in place, so that we can have jobs, and we can extract the resources that we need to. We can have secondary industries, and we can sell domestically and internationally. And I think too, when we unlock the massive wealth that we have in our resources here in Western Canada, and follow along with our taxation, our fully researched and vetted taxation proposals, which eliminate all income tax, and I do mean all income tax, is you're going to have such a concentration of capital, such a concentration of money that people have in their hands, that all business, and especially the CEOs who don't want to have income in their own salary, will flock. They'll absolutely flock to Western Canada. And, I always say it'll be the Dubai of North America. You'll see more Ferraris around than anything else. Not that I care about Ferraris. I like my half ton. This notion, and you see it with conservatives and liberals, or conservatives and NP, is this cycle of overspending when the liberals are power, followed by deep cuts when the conservatives are in power. And I said, let's square the circle and cut out the middleman. Let's keep our resources here. Let's take care of our homeless. Let's take care of our addicted. Let's take care of folks with mental health issues, the unemployed. Let's make it, for our First Nations people. I mean, they don't have clean drinking water. That is, I mean, and I've policed. For those of you who don't know, I spent 2 years as a soldier with the Canadian Forces and 9 years as a policeman with the Mounted Police, and I policed on some of the roughest reserves in Western Canada. And yeah, like you wouldn't tolerate your neighbor's kids not having drinking water or sleeping in basements where there's sewage. So why would we tolerate it for nation and neighbors? I mean, to me, that's the epitome of racism. So we can have both. We can have both. We can have a very high quality of life while maintaining free market and being fiscally sound, and making sure that we're not robbing from the private sector, and that the public sector jobs that we add value that the public couldn't do for themselves, such as military, police, and all the border security, all the other international trade, all the other things that really only a national government can provide. Government should not be in people's lives, and every dollar, if government can't do more for you with your dollar than you can do for yourself, there's an obligation to leave your dollar alone, a moral obligation to leave your dollar alone or to give it back to you.
So Tool Pete, he has a great question. He says, do you feel that the Emergency Act will lead to what a lot of us fear, non-handout media buildings being raided, are Western gun owners being taken, like guns being taken, sorry, houses raided without warrants, and people taken without arrest? What's your opinion on that?
Well, let's look at the facts right now. We have the most heavily, and I'm a firearms owner. We have the most heavily vetted firearms community in the world. And you have citizens in Canada mass purchasing firearms and ammunition out of the absolute fear of Justin Trudeau, fear of our own government giving Justin Trudeau absolute power. I mean, this man he's a communist sympathizer. He admires dictators. I mean, these are his own words. These aren't my words. And we look in history, whether it be the Bolshevik Revolution, the Chinese cultural, the Great Leap Forward, the reign of Pol Pot, Hitler. You look at firearms confiscations, mass firearms confiscations, and you look at what follows. It's horrible. we back in June of last year, when there was a rumor of a gun grab, we released a billboard, and you can go look it up right now. It says, "Is Justin Trudeau leading us to civil war?" Because we believe in more free speech and not less free speech. We take these things that we're talking about right now and we bring it out to the public. I mean, if anybody grew up in a household with alcoholism, they would know, or drug abuse, they would know that there's a lot of things that you say to the people on the outside, but it's a whole lot different than how we're living at home. And I think that's the same way as Canadian politics is we present this face, but what we talk about behind the scenes is different. So we believe, we're kind of like the black sheep of the family, saying, when the mom is saying, "Oh, that's just Uncle Roger. He's being funny," and we're like, "No, he's drunk, driving the car backwards, crashing in the house with his wiener hanging out." And that's kind of the approach we take. So we point these things out too. I think that you're going to have major civil unrest, and nobody, again, having served with police and the military and knowing violence, nobody wants to see that. And I think the government really needs to rethink this. And to be honest, I don't think the international community, well, I shouldn't say that because they're all doing self-imposed lockdown too, except for the United States and their allies. I don't think the United States and their allies will tolerate some of the things that Justin Trudeau wants to do for Western Canada. But with all that said, I think Eastern Canada would accept it in a heartbeat.
And actually, I have a great question that kind of goes off of that. If we separate, if we manage to get there, how do you see us moving forward in terms of repairing our relationship with the East?
Repairing our relationship with the East?
In terms of just trying to move forward and hopefully establish things like free trade that we currently don't have.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's going to be good sentiment in Canada. I think our number one priority needs to be to develop relationships with larger markets like the United States and India. When it comes to Eastern Canada, there may be value in terms of their desire to purchase our natural resources to help their manufacturing sector. There may be a role for Eastern Canada when it comes to financing some of the development projects or investing in our development projects. So we're open to foreign capital, provided that it's not eroding our national sovereignty. So I think there is the opportunity for trade with Eastern Canada or relationship with more of the financial centers like Toronto, Montreal. I really, unless they kickstart the fishing industry on the East Coast, I don't really see much of a relationship with Atlantic Canada. With British Columbia, I think it would probably come to a little bit of economic hardball. If they want to not allow us access to ports, I think you're going to see us saying, "Well, we're not going to allow you access to the rest of Canada." And I think we'll see eye to eye pretty quickly, or turning off the taps and $3, $4, $5 liter gas. I think they'll evolve pretty quickly. Yeah. I mean, reality is, I'm not going to lie. I think there is going to be tension, but I don't. Most importantly, avoiding any kind of physical conflict. I think is the most important thing with anything that we do.
So I have another question for you. You tweeted recently talking about the Constitution of Alberta. How do you see Wexit's role in supporting I think you mentioned the People's Constitution in Alberta?
Yeah, the plan, the restrictions on public gatherings was to travel throughout the province in the same way we had our Wexit rallies, and basically invite people out and all the different issues, whether it be taxation, how long how long politicians can serve, like whether it be 2 terms for president or even 2 terms for a regular politician. Looking at different forms of what form of democracy do we want to be, a constitutional republic, veterans' rights, First Nations, firearms, you name it, like kind of build your own country. To be able to go place to place and have the kind of different facilitators at different stations, allowing people to provide their input. Then the goal was to come back to everybody after a few months and say, hey, this seems to kind of be what people are saying. Is this what you like? And obviously, with the restriction on public gathering right now, that's we're going to have to put that on the back burner. So right now, I think more the discussion is with industry. Our discussion with captains of industry, with agriculture, with energy, and again talking with folks in the military to look at that side of it. So we just have to kind of reverse our order, I think, a little bit right now. By the grace of God, when this blows over and or we have to force it to blow over, then we can do that. We can have that, and it's really important. I mean, we do not want to step out of one form of poor political representation into another. And one of the biggest things that people want is more of a voice, more direct democracy, whether it be MLA or MP recall. This idea that we just kind of vote for our new dictator every 4 years. People are tired of that, and they want to hold politicians accountable for when they lie or they steal or they do everything that Justin Trudeau's done. We want our politicians held accountable.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Clayton has a great question. He basically is asking what main reforms, what main reforms would you be looking at for the education system, I'd say in Alberta and Saskatchewan?
I mean, I think choice in education. I mean, I was a board member in Alberta for Parents for Choice in Education. So whether you want secular education or you want faith-based education or you want more of a Montessori program or more of an academic focused or a prep school, I think those things are good. I think that deregulate, having a standard of what we're looking for, but allowing different organizations to deliver it in the format that there's a demand for from parent rights, parents' decisions for their kids is number one, and we want to see results. We want to see the same standard of education. I mean, one of the good things about immigration, with especially, and I'm not saying it's completely restricted here, but and the folks from these communities, whether it be Chinese immigrants or Eastern European or Jewish, I mean, looking for the same standard of parents and those families, because I talk to them. Education is so big, and having positions for education, post-secondary education positions for doctors and lawyers and engineers here, and that's what all parents want their kids to succeed, or for the trades as well. So we want the availability for the training to match the demand, to match the demand of the student parents with the demand of the economy. So we look at certain incentives, R&D for industries that help our economy, even partial student loan forgiveness for certain qualified degrees or certain qualified trades. So what we don't want coming out of school eyeball in debt. We look at Quebec. We look at the insanely low cost there. We don't like the fact that we're funding it. So we don't think that Quebec student and has a debt. I've got kids. My wife and I, we want to be able to have the choice of the form of education they receive, and we want the education to be in place, high quality education that will help them be competitive in domestic and global markets. So all is that to say, long way of saying is we want the choice to rest with people, and we want government to get out of the way.
Yeah, 100%. So I basically have a question about if we manage to separate. The way I see it, uh, Canada owes us billions of dollars in equalization payments. Um, of course, we're going to owe them some money in terms of federal projects, but it's going to offset, and they're still going to owe us billions of dollars. Would you consider leveraging Canada for a land transfer agreement in order to get us coastal access?
I mean, yeah, we got it. We got to look at all of it. I mean, first and foremost, this idea that we owe a percentage of the national debt. No, the fact that we happen to be born, we're not born into slavery or chattel, and we have no effective political representation. But yeah, we have been paying billions and billions more than we got in return. So I think that we have a claim on our percentage of what we've put into the country. We haven't had a say in it, but we have put that in, and the mismanagement of Eastern Canada is their own. So, and they have a queen that owns 1/6 of planet Earth, so she can pay the rest of whatever they think that we owe. But yeah, I mean, whether it's through a land transfer or whether it's through economic leverage that we have to exert on BC to get our access to the coast, we will do whatever is in the best interest of Western Canada. And obviously, by this point, we don't just go along to get along. We negotiate, we talk tough, and we back it up. We have plans to back it up.
Awesome. I have another question from Red X Dragon. He's basically asking at what point would you or would you ever consider joining the United States?
Well, I mean, we did some polling on this a little while back, and 90% of Wexit supporters support being our own republic. Only 10% support being the 51st, 52nd, 53rd, and 54th states. But out of that percentage, 90% of that 90% picked joining the U.S. as a second choice in some form, whether it's being a state or whether it's being a state or whether it's being like a protectorate, kind of like Puerto Rico or the U.S. Virgin Islands or something like that, where we have American currency and you can join the American military, but we kind of administer our own affairs. I think Justin Trudeau, the more Justin Trudeau's been doing what he's doing, and the more that people lose hope, the more people are talking about joining the United States who wouldn't have considered it before. We're looking at a country not too far from 90% of our population in all of Canada who are pushing for a cure and are pushing to get their economy kickstarted in 15 days. And we're being told here that, a vaccine will be so far away and, we have to live like this and social distance and have our economy shut down, controlled by the government, forever, and accept guaranteed basic income and again, Eastern Canada may like that. Ontario may like that. The GTA, the Asian population out there. But I think that the more it becomes impossible or hard to separate, the more that Trudeau and Ottawa's playing nasty politics against us, the more you're going to hear about people wanting to join the United States. So simply, I take the position, I represent the majority of people who are pushing for republic, and if that changes, then I represent that. I represent the view of the majority of Western Canadians. It's simply my job to achieve what Western Canadians want.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Black Robe has an excellent question. He says, "How are we going to be able to handle the difficult task of First Nations rights, reparations, treaties, and land claims after we separate or
Right.
during the separation
Yeah.
process?"
So the first thing, I mean, the British Crown has double dealt. They have their treaties with the First Nations, and they've also assigned all land and resources to the provinces. So this idea that it somehow reverts back, and then all the rest of us, as non-First Nation people, have to go march off into the sea if we separate, is completely bogus. I think a better approach, and the approach we've been taking, is, and also, I mean, the current, the way that the federal government's treated the First Nations for 152 is genocidal and criminal, and there's corrupt First Nations chiefs and politicians who benefit from the rest of the people live in poverty. So the approach we take is this: going to cut out the psychotic genocidal middleman. We're going to offer everybody the ability to benefit from the land and the resources that we have. I mean, just in Alberta alone, $20 trillion resources, 4.3 million people. Each of us are all worth $4.65 million. So whatever that shakes out to in terms of the new country and what benefits people have with kind of like a signing bonus to achieve separation. I think the First Nations people are just like the rest of us. They're going to vote for their own prosperity, and we give them the opportunity to do that. We think private property is huge. Right now, Trudeau still has the ability under the Indian Act to sell the reserves out from under them. He's trying to push it to be municipalities under the control of the province. And we believe in private property. And when it comes to historical abuses, well, when I say we, I'm saying non-First Nations people who were born within the past 50 or 60 years or whatever. We didn't commit these atrocities, and we have no obligation to pay for the sins of. And again, my family are immigrants, so I don't have any obligation to pay for what generations of the Canadian government, Crown officials have done. However, I'm more than happy, and I think we're all more than happy to fund criminal, international, human rights or international crimes against humanity lawsuits against the government of Canada. Happy to fund those lawsuits. The government of Canada can pay for their abuses. We're not paying for the abuses, so that we can all move. Once we've helped our First Nations friends and neighbors achieve justice, I think you can't move forward as one people. And when we say one people, I mean, again, whether you're white, black, First Nations, Mexican, Chinese, any race, First Nations. And again, we say First Nations, there's hundreds of different First Nations. They're different races. This whole idea that First Nations are one monolithic entity is bogus, and it only serves liberals. So, but yeah, let's help our friends and neighbors achieve the justice that they never achieved. I think that's a part of common humanity, and move forward as one people, as Western Canadians, and enjoy your culture, enjoy your heritage. But we're moving forward as Western Canadians. We're not going to have racial apartheid legislation like the Indian Act. We never tolerate a white guy act, a black guy act, a Muslim guy act, a Jewish guy act. We tolerate an Indian Act, and that is so beyond racist. So we're going to move forward.
Yeah, and I think you answered the second part of his question too, which was great to see. And he also, of course, mentioned that foreign interests have been using First Nation people, and they've been destroying our economy. And we have to do whatever it takes to keep things from splitting and splintering further apart, as he kind of framed the question there. I have another question from Canada. He says, would Wexit endorse creating a constitutional right to bear arms for Alberta?
Okay. Hey, just so you know, I'm going to have to get off the phone in 4 minutes to put my kids to bed.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And quid pro quo, 100% in favor of firearm. And again, constitutionally protecting, your right to self-protection. And I would say this, just because we're not going to use the same language as the Americans are. I mean, let's just use our own language. I would say the right to effective self-protection. Under the Criminal Code of Canada, you have the exact same rights of self-defense and use of force as a police officer does. The only difference is powers of arrest. If somebody tells us that somebody beat somebody else up, unless we've seen it, we can't effect a citizen's arrest. And that's the difference. The cop, peace officer can, if they believe it happened, they can go. So we don't think the life of the Prime Minister of Canada is one of 3 people who's just entitled to carry a firearm. I don't know if anybody's ever asked Justin Trudeau what kind of pistol he carries, if he carries, but which I guess is his choice. But the idea that the life of a police officer, and again, I was a police officer. I joined the mounted police just after Mayor Thorpe happened. And when Mayor Thorpe happened, it was all the firemen, because the cops are all gunned down. They're 9mm pistols, and they're getting blasted by a guy who had superior firepower. So they were coming and helping the cops with giving them their rifles and all kinds of stuff. And I think that the first thing I was ever taught in police college was the police are the public and the police. And I think that the same thing, the citizen is the government and the government is the citizen. So we have a whole plan. We have a very well developed policy by experts on that. And I think we, in fact, have the best firearms policy and self defense policy in the world, which, yes, is going to be constitutionally protected.
Awesome, Peter. Well, I think I'm going to let you go, man. Let you put your kids to bed there, obviously. Thank you so much for answering all those questions. I think that was a really informative town hall. And I appreciate everybody who showed up and contributed some awesome constructive questions. And yeah, no, I'd look forward to possibly talking to you, and maybe we can collaborate in the future. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I'm just so grateful that you extend the offer to me and to your audience. And I just want to give my best wishes to the Unify the West community. You guys are doing a great job. I love your forum. And anything I can do to, like, say, I mean, I don't like using the cliche, we're all in this together, but let's make this a better place than we found it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the kind of stuff that needs to be the overarching message. Well, thank you, Peter. Have yourself
you're
a
welcome.
great night.
You take care. Bye.
Yeah, take her easy, buddy. And Spencer, are you there? Can you hear me, Spencer? Well, oh, well, I didn't mute anybody, so that wasn't me.
I muted myself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought people muted themselves. Okay. Spencer, are you wanting to maybe do some of your COVID-19 stuff, since it's early, it's 8 o'clock. We could use this last hour if you wanted to. It's up to you. Yeah, he's ready. Awesome. I'll pass it off to you, buddy. Spencer's going to talk about
Okay.
the COVID-19 crisis, and then we're all going to, have a good old town hall in the last hour here on that. Take her away.
Thanks, guys. It's great to immediately precede Peter Downing there. I want the focus of this next segment of the town hall to be about how Justin Trudeau has used the coronavirus, COVID-19, in order to extend his powers way beyond any prime minister before him has ever been able to do within such a short amount of time. Stephen Harper was harped on, for lack of a better pun, to be abusive with his use of executive powers and how he manipulated the use of the Senate, which is basically an extended arm of the prime minister. And there's a lot of explanation behind that. But despite that, Stephen Harper has gained tons of criticism from liberal media like CBC and like any attacks that the liberal government can conjure up against conservatives. But none of that, absolutely none of their complaints come close to how much Justin Trudeau has been able to abuse the Constitution in such a short amount of time, the BNA Act. So I'm going to start off. As you're all aware, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. COVID-19. I have tons of links, so I'm going to be spamming you with information. Don't necessarily have to go through all of it, but definitely take use of whatever you think is more important for you to remember. Right here, I have an infographic. Hold on. I'm gonna change my mic to not push to talk for a second here. All right. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. No problem, man.
Okay, great. So here's a great infographic that I posted it here in the link that shows just how infectious COVID-19 is. And that is the main reason why we're in a pandemic state right now, because COVID-19 has a slightly higher death rate than influenza and a comparable infection rate, which makes it that much scary because within the 2 week incubation period, you could be spreading the virus to other people around you without even having symptoms yourself, which is a huge worry for people who wish to contain the virus in order to work on the vaccine and distribute it as soon as possible and try to make sure that this doesn't become something like as effectual as Spanish flu was in the 1930s. So, because that's how deadly this virus could be globally and is already proving to be, with the thousands of deaths coming out of around the world through China, through Italy, because of the close workers, like because of the migrant workers that were coming from Wuhan directly going to Italy working in their textile mills. That's a huge reason why it spread to Italy so fast. It's gone from Italy all over Europe. It's in Britain. It's hitting Spain quite heavily right now, as you know, and it's finally made its way to the States and Canada, and we're actually experiencing quite a rapid spread of it because it's already recorded in almost every province, southern province, from east to west. So this infographic helps explain why, and so they call it the boomer disease. This is the boomer virus. The main mortality effects of it target older age people who have pre-existing conditions like like cardiovascular disease, lung disease, chronic respiratory disease like hypertension. Any pre-existing condition exacerbates. Sorry, who's on the?
Okay, sorry. There's a couple people that are having issues. Ammo, you're getting a little bit of echo, and Canada, yeah, we were getting a bit of your background noise. And Ammo, we're
So,
still getting it.
so to move on, pre-existing conditions exacerbate the mortality rate among elder people significantly. Younger people aren't as risk, but they still are at risk if they can't get immediate care. So there's quite a lot to worry about because it puts a huge strain on the health system, and unfortunately, some of the policies that we've been taking in response to that have only made the strain on the healthcare system worse. Like taking kids out of school, for instance, you just got to think about how many nurses out there who take the brunt of most of the handling of the virus now have to also take care of their kids who are no longer being taken care of at school. So it's taking some nurses away from work. They don't want to go into work as much. I mean, and not to mention, like some nurses are getting infected and they're having to work. They can't work when they're sick, and so the second they test positive, they have to stop, like cease working. So there's just a lot of compounding factors to this virus, which has led to it becoming a pandemic. And all of this sounds like very apocalyptic, but really it's almost like another reality that we're going to have to learn to live with before hopefully like an antivirus, like an antivirus, a vaccine comes out that'll quell most of the spreading of this virus. So here's a great article where this guy here, Dr. Michael Osterholm, basically explains in this article that this pandemic isn't going to be quelled within like 2 weeks of self-isolation. This pandemic is going to last for a long time throughout the year, possibly 2 or 3 years. The distribution of the vaccine that's going to help us keep this virus from spreading as much as it has been. It's a lengthy process before it becomes super effective and then herd immunity kicks in. So like unfortunately, we're going to have to swallow this pill. And I will argue against a lot of more radical news outlets out there who want to completely get rid of the worry or like the sense of urgency that we should have surrounding this topic. There's the sentiment out there that, oh, it's fine, like it's not that much more deadly or infectious as the flu. It's like as the common cold, and like and and they're wrong to a degree. Like the mortality rate is higher, but the infection rate is comparable, and it's going to be another flu that society is going to have to deal with. So it's going to make getting sick more frequent among people, and it's leading to, I wouldn't say necessarily, it's leading to a lot of contention on how we handle this pandemic appropriately. And I'm going to go to the most powerful nation in the world, the United States, and the backlash that their government response has been getting in handling this disease. And the Democrats are using it as a political tool. There's conspiracies coming out of it that China has like manufactured this disease, and like those are some pretty like out of left field conspiracies that really don't help us concentrate on how to like deal with the virus in our own daily lives. But then the Democrats on the other side have been using it as a political tool in order to take out and target anybody who's on the conservative side. They're using it directly to target Trump. And unfortunately, America has adopted this overall opinion that Trump actually isn't the right guy to handle this outbreak. And to be truthful, he isn't. The way, like, there was an address coming out of Florida that he gave yesterday. And the general consensus after the address he gave was that he didn't put enough time in preparing for it. He didn't make it seem as much of an important issue as we should be taking it, and that his own like understanding of the virus isn't adequate enough to please the American public who want like a capable president in order to weather this storm. So unfortunately, the Democrats are pretty successful in their use of targeting Trump. And one major tool that they've been using is the fact that the Republican government over the years has been defunding the Emergency Pandemic Response Unit, which there's a lot of context behind this defunding, but the Republican response to this virus has been quite adequate. Trump's personal understanding and response to the American public has not been, but the government's response and federal and like state level and municipal government responses has been quite adequate. They've been doing everything they can in order to deal with this pandemic to the level that it's scaring the public. It's creating mass hysteria. People are stocking up on toilet paper. You can't find toilet paper in any grocery store that you go to. You can't find, like, only just now, like, our grocery store is finally coming in with like second and third shipments in order to handle like the huge demand for non-perishable goods. It's like the public is going quite insane. They're losing their heads. We're all chickens with our heads cut off right now. And so the Democrats are playing on this fear, and they're pointing out that the Republican, I posted the article again. But anyway, so Trump disbanded the NSC pandemic unit that experts had praised. Well, in actuality, the defunding, almost per dollar that was happening to this unit, there's a graph there that shows you just how over time that organization was getting defunded. That same money wasn't going out of the healthcare system. It was staying within the healthcare system and instead being funneled into the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, which is known to be a more effective. Again, the same graph. My apologies. I'm also losing my voice, so bear with me. Almost per dollar, the same amount of money was going to the CDC, CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So, which is more widely known as a more effective organization to handle pandemics and to take care of issues of this magnitude. So like financially, the government wasn't necessarily taking money out of the healthcare system. That's just not a reality. But the Democrats want to push the numbers without any context in order to make it look like that. And that's just the reality of politics. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys had those concerns, but and Biden's playing on this. Like Trudeau's playing on this. It's the same kind of political victory, you could say, for the leftists that they've been playing on this fear a lot and just criticizing every effort, right? Like right conservative governments have been making, like the Republicans and I don't want to emphasize that the response has been totally federal. I mean, you got to give a lot of credit where it's due, which is your local governments and your more regional, like overarching governments that have been responding to this virus with great efficiency. They've been pooling in as much resources as possible and almost at like contention with the federal government because their policies don't necessarily align with what the regions think is best for them in order to contain the pandemic. So it's almost like there's too many levels of bureaucracy, and they don't necessarily know how to coalesce and work with each other in order to effectively tackle this, like with like with a clear plan. So it's unfortunate, it really is, but that's just the reality of bureaucracy. I mean, nobody knows like where the red tape is. I mean, different jurisdictions always overstepping each other's toes. It's a reality with some governments. So just for an example, like the shortage of testing kits and the shortage of masks, these kind of concerns are almost global in aspect because these masks and like vital essential equipment that the healthcare system needs in order to combat this virus are being produced globally. Like most of these masks are getting produced in like India now, funny enough. So they're benefiting from the emerging economy of this virus scare, which you wouldn't think like a country like India would benefit like this. And then there's the other side, like they're also probably suffering a lot more infection and spreading the virus a lot more than we would know of, just because of how disorganized India is as a government. But it's this constant battle between bureaucracies and then the battle between different nation states and like how they're interacting with each other in addressing this virus. Like take Russia, for example. The second they heard that this was starting to become an infectious pandemic, they shut down their borders immediately. I mean, that's a great benefit to a completely autocratically controlled communist, socialist communist oligarchy. But it's not necessarily coincides with. Yeah, I'm allowed to get it. I want to keep going. Okay. But it doesn't necessarily allow a whole lot of freedoms to people outside of living in Russia. You know, so like North Korea, for example, they're probably not suffering that greatly from this virus, but the free world and everybody else who wants to interact with like other nations outside of their own, unfortunately, have to learn to deal with this pandemic in a different way. And there's a lot of clashing of opinions. I'm going to move on to this topic too. That this virus, attached to how the Democrats are using it to target Trump, China's taking a globalist narrative approach. The virus originally started in Wuhan, which is like an inner province inside of China. And their containment of it has been well to be like quite invasive. They erected huge hospitals like out of thin air, like within months. These hospitals weren't well equipped or very well designed, but the fact that they were able to do this on such short notice and in such a short time speaks volumes to the effectiveness of like the kind of communist system that they have going on in China. But they've also kind of taken this narrative a step further, saying that they've quelled the infection. They've quelled this virus, which is a gross statement to make considering how infectious this disease is. And it's not necessarily true. I mean, you also have to take into consideration the fact that they've been exporting or expelling journalists outside of the country at the same time. So everything you're hearing out of China is under a controlled state narrative. They want to tell the rest of the world that communist, like People's Republic of China, communist regime has been super effective in handling this virus, and that you need not worry about us spreading it any further because we're such an effective government. You can trust us to handle this pandemic. That's just not the case. It's lies. It's communist propaganda, and you can't trust it. And on top of that, I want to find the article now, but they just released recently that, in fact, the infection rate is starting up again in China, but now they're blaming immigrants to China on causing the infection to continue and the pandemic to worsen in China now. So it's just this continuation of a global narrative that at first tells you that they're super well equipped to handle the virus, and now the narrative goes on to say that it's not us that's continuing the problem, it's everybody else. So now they're putting the blame on the rest of the global community. So like, be weary of the type of script that you read coming out of Chinese propaganda. And now I want to also make this statement known that I am not blaming the Chinese for this virus. Okay? I think the conspiracy that biohazardous weapons divisions like in and around Wuhan release this virus on their own public is total hogwash. What self-respecting government would do that to their own people? I mean, bureaucrats are putting themselves at risk of like contracting this disease if they were to do that. Like it's in everybody's self-interest to not release such a mass hysteria and scare on their own country. If anything, if that conspiracy has any like foundation, it was the virus would have came out of Malaysia or out of Cambodia or somewhere outside of China, so where they could release it in like a more or less contained country and then respond and like react to it in a more distant manner, like not being so close to the disease. Like I cannot give any credence to the argument that the Chinese released this virus on themselves. Take it with a grain of salt. I mean, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but that's just like through my observations, the narrative I think that you should more closely be aware of is that China wants to make their handling, or at least like the fictional handling of this virus, look good for the communist regime, the People's Republic of China. How has the U.S. responded financially? They've injected trillions of dollars into the economy. They've slashed interest rates, and Canada has taken the same measures. At first, we were just following suit with the Fed. We're following suit with the Fed. We're injecting money directly into the economy. We're slashing interest rates as well. We're buying up security, like mortgage-backed securities. I mean, repeat of 2008, folks. That was the global recession that brought us down to begin with all the collateralized debt credit, but which was all garbage. But anyway, we're just doing the same repeat. We're trusting failed bonds to get us out of this recession, which. Oh, sorry. Oh, what seems to be wrong with the voice settings? While you fix that, guys, I'm gonna get a glass of water. So,
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you just ended there. um, well, I mean, and Spencer opened up the topic pretty well on COVID. With this sort of thing, I mean, and with everything going on, I think that we could probably skip the questions on this one and go right to free discussion essentially. Like, what's everybody else's point of view, or does anybody have a comment, or maybe a question, whatever it is?
all right. Um, is everything good, Jake?
Yeah, no, everything's good. I was just opening up the floor to other people, whether they want to ask questions or they have comments on what was said, or have something to add themselves. I mean, COVID-19 is affecting all of us, really personally in a lot of different ways. So I'm sure somebody has something.
Oh,
I,
I'm totally sure
sorry.
my opinion's probably brushed up against somebody else's. Yeah, go ahead, Black Robe.
Um, I wanted to say that we are now in a very unique situation. We are a country that is clamping down on our citizens, and we didn't have our rights to begin with. But then on
Can I
top of
stop you
it,
there, Black Robe? I'm
yeah,
getting to that. I'm getting to that my story, and I'll be happy to like open up the floor a little bit later after I've tied my whole spiel.
Oh, I didn't know you hadn't ended. I'm sorry, Spencer.
No, that's fine. I just had to.
I was
yeah,
There's some problems going on with the
Oh,
mics,
okay,
and
yeah,
I
you
got a
wrap
glass
up,
of water.
then Black Robe, go ahead afterwards. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
yeah.
I only have a couple more links to post, and
Oh,
your fault for
don't
that.
rush. It's all good. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Like, we got a whole half hour, so it's not a problem.
No, it's cool. So yeah, going off on how Canada's been responding to this economically has been just a repeat of the states. Uh, Up until going straight into what you were concerned about, Black Robe, is now Trudeau has taken it upon himself because he has those kind of executive powers that Trump doesn't necessarily have, because he'd have to go through two legislative bodies in order to get approval in order to be as powerful as Trudeau has now made himself. But Trudeau's taken upon himself to now take an authoritarian approach to how Canada is going to deal with this pandemic, which is something I completely disagree with, as I'm sure all of you do. So, on top of already doing all the measures that the states are doing in order to inject in their economy, now Canada is taking the authoritarian approach, and they're now pretty much unilaterally, or I don't want to say unilaterally, it's only Trudeau, pretty much through his executive powers, saying that he can now raise taxation without representation, that he can fund all of these government programs, increase child benefits. Just like if you follow this link here, this is the Liberals basically explaining how they've extended their powers on like in an unprecedented manner. New emergency care benefit, new emergency support benefit, 6 months of interest-free moratorium on Canadian student loan payments. Okay, I'm going to benefit from that. That's kind of nice. But top-up payments of low and modest income Canadians with GST credit. Like, they're just every single benefit that you can imagine. They're expanding. 157 million adding funding for Canadian experienced homelessness. Like 305 million for new Indigenous community support fund. This is all money that they're injecting on top of already putting in 27 billion dollars directly into the Canadian economy, 55 billion into businesses and households, and then with all these other injections, it's a total of 82 billion in support. That Trudeau's essentially buying everybody's vote. He's using this scare as a way to turn this government, make it omnipresent in everybody's lives. I I can't see why anybody wouldn't want to experience all these benefits that he's just throwing away, giving to people without, like, there's not going to be any scrutiny. Like, say goodbye to anybody, say goodbye to the precautions that welfare programs take in order to limit like parasitic abuse of the system. That's like, none of those things are going to be taken into consideration. The whole goal here is to just give handouts. He's Trudeau right now thinks that he's Robin Hood. He's robbed our government that's that the rest of Canadians rely on in order to be like a sober second thought, and like a wise overarching bureaucracy. He's pretty much robbed us of that assurity that they're doing this out of wisdom, and he's just giving out handouts. It's something that you have to be cautious of, because he's not doing it with the vote of the people, which is why I want to throw this up here. This is a petition coming out of the Alberta Institute, basically saying how all of this taxation, because guess what? All this money that he's throwing out and giving to people now, we're going to have to pay back later. We are going to have to pay back later. Boomers, not necessarily. They're leaving the system. They're not going to be dealt with like the brunt of this debt load that he's implementing in just such a short amount of time. Like, the government typically does not spend like nearly $100 billion in a couple months. That's not like Canada can't sustain that. So the amount of taxation that he's going to have to increase in order to fund all of these benefits is absurd. We are going to become a collapsed socialist state within a couple years. I'll argue, maybe within the year, if you also take into effect the huge recessionary costs that like are drastically affecting our energy system here in Alberta. Like, it blows my mind that this is allowed to happen in a supposedly democratic country. Like, we do not live in a free country, and it worries the hell out of me. So, I mean, having Peter Downing being interested in coming to this server, speaking to us about alternate options to Confederation, is probably the last vestige of hope that I have in living this far north. Otherwise, I'm going to immediately move down to the States, because all I can see is just depressionary collapse, and like it's a revert, like all the fears that what's her name, Zayakova, or the Ukrainian lady that met with us on Zoom a while ago, like
Zuzana,
yeah, thank you. All the fears that Zuzana has, that she experienced living, was it the Ukraine or Poland or
Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia.
In Czechoslovakia, okay. All those fears coming to fruition here, which is a scary thought. It's the red menace caused by ourselves, essentially, because liberals have a hold on the narrative, CBC being a huge obstacle that needs to get taken down if any of this like propaganda is going to get curbed in a more constructive way. And these are all the fears that I have that are resulting out of this abuse of the fears that are being created by a naturally occurring pandemic. Like, COVID-19 is not unique. I mean, SARS is in the same family. MERS is in the same virus family. They're all coronaviruses. COVID-19 is just the single strain of it, and it happens to be more infectious and less deadly, but it's creating more of a fear just because of how infectious it is. So it's not a unique thing, right? And I'm gonna address what happened to Tim Timmermans last week, which is why I didn't present this town hall last week, and why I'm doing a section now this week, is because I didn't want to continue spreading fear and xenophobic conspiracies targeting Asian people. He's of the mind that Chinese people are directly to blame. He can't take that separation that the Chinese Communist government is to blame, and that it's not necessarily the Chinese people. The virus comes out of the people just because of like natural mutation factors that are associated with viruses. It's not something that they have control over. They say they have control over it, but as I told you earlier, it's just to follow this narrative that they're creating to make themselves look better. But I didn't want Tim to hijack my town hall meeting and start spreading hate, lies, racism. It's not something I'm support at all. I'm so happy that we've also taken the step as a server to detach ourselves from that kind of leadership. I'm so happy Peter Downing still made the effort to come out and talk to us, even without Tim's support. Like, we don't need him, guys. We are an effective, organized group of individuals who can make a change, and we can be the spread of information that is constructive for forming like just a better headspace. We need to carry a better headspace with us if we want to be resilient to like all the attacks that we're going to be facing from liberals, from the globalist agenda, from Trudeau's government. Like, there's this is the start of a long road. This virus isn't going away immediately. So that's how I want to end this town hall section, that we need to accept the fact that adversity is going to constantly be encroaching itself onto us, and it's going to feel like we can't do anything about it, and that we have to give up all of our freedoms and powers to the government. But that's simply not the truth. We can be the strong individuals that take power into in our own hands in order to make our own families and communities safe around us. So yeah, I'd just like to leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was great, Spencer. Especially that last part there. I really echo a lot of what you said. I think you said it very eloquently. And yeah, I mean, I'll just transition and pass her on to Black Robe.
Hey, thanks. And Red Dragon, I really want to say good job today. I totally, I'm with you with a lot of this stuff. One of the things that I picked out of President Trump's speech just recently that he had was he said to the press corps and in extension to the American people, a similar thing that Ted Kennedy, or not Ted Kennedy, President Kennedy put out when he talked about his goal to reach the moon in a certain number of years. President Trump said that in 15 days, the American people will emerge from this whatever it is, will emerge from this. And even though they might not be virus free, they are going to, as a culture, as a country, remove themselves from the shackles of this close down and this tyranny, and they are going to carry on with their lives, and they are going to not only have a good economy, they're going to have it better than before. And that was a goal set out there. That was a challenge set out there. And if there's one thing that the Americans are good at, is put a challenge in front of them, and they will make it happen. It angers me that here in Canada, instead of having that same spirit of working together, of accomplishing something that previously appears to be impossible, our method of dealing with it is collapsing and falling deeper within the embrace of what I would call socialism and a collapsed country. I mean, our country right now is of the same nature as Venezuela. I mean,
Oh, totally agree. 100%.
I
We're on the same
I
trajectory exactly.
I do not know how long it's going to be before we have people digging through dumpsters looking for stuff to eat. because Trudeau and his ilk are going to choose the have and have-nots. They're going to fund the have-nots that they consider haves, and or they consider meritorious of that help, and they will oppress and destroy those people who they consider to be of no merit. And it scares the hell out of me that once again we have medical boards that are deciding life and death, and in order to, it's gotten worse. Instead of showing up at the e-room and getting help from doctors and nurses, you now have to stand in a queue on a telephone for up to 12 hours in order to be assessed. So, we used to whine and cry that we'd sit in the e-room for 10, 15 hours to get a broken arm fixed. But here we are sitting in a queue waiting weeks to be assessed, waiting weeks to be told that we can enter a healthcare facility. And our healthcare facilities have totally and completely imploded upon themselves. Just with how many deaths or how many recorded illnesses do we have right now? And they have already formed the queues, they have already instituted the death panels, and they have already done all these things. It is the most scariest thing to me and the most disappointing, because I thought the Albertan spirit, I thought the Canadian spirit was that of fighting for things that we believe in and fighting for each other. And it's just so totally not that. And I heard inside for the humanity that is going to be destroyed, for the people that are going to go without care, for the deaths that are going to happen. It just hurts my soul.
Yeah, I totally agree. And be warned, like these waiting lines, things that we're experiencing now, the quarantine, the isolation, dividing people up from communicating, which is something we can overcome through the internet. Hopefully, if we don't get like server banned and whatnot, and just kicked off completely by government cyber units or whatever. I don't know if it runs that thick, but um, being divided like that and not being able to congregate and join together like uh, as a united front is something the government wants. They don't want us to get together and fight the tyranny that's being displayed. I mean, the amount of powers that Trudeau has taken is unprecedented. When can you think ever that another prime minister has taken similar measures? Oh, uh, Justin Trudeau's dad, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, when the FLQ set a bomb and set a bomb scare and kidnapped a couple politicians. Like that was the only other situation I can think of that measures like this were taken. Um, Stephen Harper's equivalency, which is not nearly as severe, was I forget which bill it was exactly that he wanted to pass, which extended the executive powers of the federal government to fight terrorists and take more executive action and more forward action in dealing with terrorist threats, like a very specific, targeted goal. The goal that Trudeau has taken is way more like what's the right word? It's ambiguous. He can extend the fear as much as he wants. The amount of deaths that he's preventing supposedly by extending his powers is plays totally in his favor. It's something we have to overcome by still congregating together like this. Um, yeah, totally. It's something I'm terrified of too. It's yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's why it's so important to continue to congregate and communicate online and keep each other informed, right? Because we're not going to get enough of that in person. And we're still going to want to stay connected. right? And I hope to God that the internet doesn't go down, because if it does, I've told people before, I'm running to Springbank.
Okay, can I interject here for just 1 second, may I?
You go
Sure,
for
go
it.
ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of loose on the context of where this policing is going on, because I was just under the impression that he was just doing this to withhold the spread of the pandemic. So I'm out of the loop on this right now. If you guys could fill me in, please.
Oh, he's completely extended executive powers towards ultimate control of Canadian coffers, and I'm not sure what kind of military steps he's going to be taking. If he's going to be putting Canada in a state of martial law, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the next overstep that he does. Um, yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
well,
do
you
have
look
I
at
do
the-
have links in the military, and they have been given their warning orders, and they are going to be moving out to the larger centers. They are going to be setting up checkpoints, um, and as the days go on, um, traditionally it has been up to the provincial governments to enact things considered health matters. However, as he has enacted this, well, and I can't remember what he called it, but essentially it's the Emergency Act. As he has done this, he has given himself the sole decision of how much authority, how much power, um, how much they can destroy your lives. So, like with fines, with jail time, and martial law, essentially, you're out past curfew, bang, you're dead thing. So those are totally within his power, and he has taken control of those powers. However, and he has threatened the provincial governments that if they do not comply with what he has asked, he will come in and he will enact that. And some governments have. Manitoba, Saskatchewan have instituted fines for congregating. They have instituted you can go here, you can go there type of thing. And I know, like, my job right now is security, and we have been informed that we will be receiving papers to enable us to go to work and back home again, but nothing else. And that we will, in the next few days, be needing those papers in order to go to work. So what does that mean? That means checkpoints. That means if you're found out and you don't have these papers, you will either be fined and returned to your home physically, or fined and put in jail, but you will not be able to continue with civil, and air quotes there, civil life. So that's what we have right now, and what's coming down the hill is, I don't know, just let your imagination wander.
Does
This is a
anybody
guy.
else have something they can
Yeah,
contribute that they know of? And
I do. I want to talk real quickly, Oswald, about today's developments. If you didn't see it, Justin Trudeau tried to put a bill forward to give him unprecedented spending powers. Now, this means basically that he would be able to spend whatever he wants and wherever he wants it without the approval of Parliament. So just be
And that
able
was
to
for 2
ram through
years.
whatever the hell he wants in cabinet. And frankly, I mean, and he's getting a lot of criticism. I mean,
He's
I think
literally
it's
pulling a
completely
Hitler.
undemocratic. Yeah, it's completely undemocratic.
And taxation authority as well.
yeah,
Okay, but
Unlimited, uh, not limited taxation power. And with that, just like what we saw down in the United States, when the IRS went after conservative groups and groups that were wanting to bring reform to the government, the IRS went and targeted every single one of them and essentially pile drive them into the ground with tax issues so that they could no longer function, they could no longer promote their stuff. So if you follow it to its natural...
Can I ask you to make your points more succinctly, please?
I thought I was, but okay.
They're quite drawn out, but
okay, so essentially taxation, unlimited taxation means that he can pick and choose who he's going to tax, and who he's going to end up taxing is us out of existence. And that's just another tool that he has.
Okay, again here, I am still kind of at a loss here because to me, just the how would I say, the normal perspective on this is simply the fact that this is simply all done simply to withhold the quarantine. Oh, so sorry, like enact on the quarantine and try to stop the pandemic as best as it can be done. And so far, what I'm getting from the context of this is simply that I'm inferring that it's kind of a personal attack on Albertans' liberties. But I mean, I may be misconstruing that, so please, again, I mean, that's what I'm getting from this conversation.
I mean, what we're worried about, basically, Oswaldo, is that that they will take the opportunity to infringe on a lot of our civil liberties because of this pandemic. Now, I'm all for enacting certain measures in terms of social distancing, all that necessary things we have to do to protect ourselves and mainly our older loved ones and all that sort of stuff. But I really don't see the benefit of them being able to ram whatever the hell they want without the oversight of Parliament. Like Parliament, I mean, the opposition has already made it very clear, Conservatives, NDP, Bloc, Greens alike, that they're willing to work with the government and are willing to allow the government to spend more money than they were predicting. And they're not going to impede that progress. However, they are also not going to allow the government to get away with enacting these sorts of martial law things. But obviously, with the opposition, I mean, there's not always complete agreement. So all the liberals have to do is get one of the parties on board, and then he can pass this. So ultimately, it's worrisome because once they have these sort of unprecedented powers, you see what happened in Quebec. There were mass arrests. A lot of the arrests were not lawful, and a lot of these people ended up being let go after this crisis ended, which took months. And of course, in the High River, like in the floods with Fort Mac floods, there were people in the High River that had their guns taken away by the RCMP. And so, of course, with this sort of thing happening, yet another disaster, we're looking at it like, oh, another disaster. And it's even more of a mass scale one, right? That's going to affect every community, not just places like High River. Are they going to take everybody's guns?
I mean, like, to me, again, from my personal perspective, he's just kind of grasping the situation as best as he can, almost from a dictatorship point of view, simply to try his best to halt an economic decline in terms of Canada. But again, I mean, none of us are entirely pure economists here, so we can only speak on pure speculation.
Yeah, and I see again. I don't disagree with necessarily with like more money being put into this because of how badly businesses have been affected, etc. Just everything's come to a grinding halt. Obviously, people need something, right? A lot of deferrals, things like that, as well. But it doesn't mean that we have to put all of our eggs in Justin Trudeau's basket and be like, yeah, we trust you to have all the power because this is a crisis, so you need to be our dictator. It's like, no, I don't accept that. I don't accept him as my prime minister, nor do I accept him as my fucking dictator. Oh my god.
Well, I mean, as a simple basic analogy, back in the times of Rome, you would have two consuls who at the time would democratically elect a dictator who would take up a whole, like, entire objective fucking authority, pardon my language, over the entirety of everything, and would enact on that specific issue, whether it be a war, economic crisis, etc. And then the moment that was dealt with, he was removed immediately from power. But that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing an impose a democratically elected individual seizing power, which is an entirely different thing, and that is why I understand why it is a cause of concern.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's our main concern. The main concern is, like, you see it with all the opposition parties. A lot of us agree for the most part too that this crisis is unprecedented, economically especially, more so than the virus, and steps have to be taken. But yeah, no, we can't give up our freedoms along the way. Definitely not.
Can I just
Yeah,
say,
go ahead.
Jake, I don't
Go
think
ahead.
other people are allowed to chime in because they're all muted right now.
Well, they're not server muted.
Yeah, they can speak of their own free will. It's up to their volition. They just have to unmute themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the case? Okay.
I just haven't yet because I've run my stuff in circles for a while. So honestly, I'm not saying much different from you. Like, my main anger is that, the Chinese, Communist Party and my prime minister for pretty much wanting to be that. That's where my anger is. So there's really not much I can say that's really different from what you're saying, other than that you have more detail.
If I may speak on a separate issue in terms of this, this is just has to do with the unemployment insurance fiasco currently going on. So I recently lost I was currently laid off temporarily or indefinitely until this is done because again I currently worked at a restaurant, and I applied for EI the day of. My record of employment was submitted 2 days after, simple stuff, and I still haven't received EI. Now this is just an entirely separate tangent, but my a coworker of mine who just got his citizenship, I believe it was 2-3 days ago of all things. He's only been working there for a month, and under 3 days, EI gave him his money in check. And I'm like, wow, they're literally presenting brand new Canadians, quote unquote, than the actual Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
And I submitted mine way prior to him. And I genuinely feel as if there is a bit of a, how would I say, favoritism when it comes to the immigrants. Please don't misconstrue that for being politically incorrect, but you know what I mean by that.
Well, immigrants is not a.
I would agree. I've
politically
heard many,
incorrect-
many cases of that.
Yeah, the immigrants is what we should be calling them.
Okay, like other thing, like, and this is supposed to be Canada. I went to Nelson Middle High School, brand new high school over here in Calgary, and that school was again 90% predominantly Sikh, Arab. I think there were like 24 actual Canadian and heritable children. Pardon my mumbling. It's just
Yeah, even for their community, you can tell when the kids are at least the second generation because they're completely different. Like,
actually,
yeah,
yeah.
completely different and nice enough people, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I was from EP Scarlet myself, and that was back in before the 2000s. I graduated in 2000, and even then, most of the community was Chinese, to be honest, and they were like third or fourth generation. So, like I said, completely different group of people.
Yeah. Gosh. Actually, one thing that I found to be a really big slap in the face here is that I went to school with a feller. His name was literally Ali Alidani. He was from Kuwait. His father was a big in the oil money over there. He sent him to Calgary as a punishment for crashing his BMW in Kuwait. He gave him full rent, free housing, everything. And you want to know what's funny? In literally under a year, this man was able to already gain citizenship, and then immediately after he got citizenship, he went back the day of. Like, again, that doesn't. It seems like they're just kind of handing it out for free at this point.
Well, they're picking the people that they want here, and then they're chastising or making life difficult for those who they don't necessarily want. And if you look at who's going to be voting Liberal, you'll start seeing some things there.
Oh yeah,
And
Trudeau has made it a policy. He even said to pretty much repopulate the West with a flood of 3 million immigrants over the next 4 years.
Yep.
Right.
That like he's basically saying,
And give them the
I
voting
don't want
handbook.
any of you to have representation over like the regions that you've built in Canada anymore. I want immigrants to have the say because they're most likely going to vote for me. Like he's recharacterizing the West completely, which is a huge abuse of immigration policy. Hugely. Like
I
but anyway,
also
guys, I want to leave it at that. Like I really appreciate the opportunity, Jake, to give this section after Peter Downing was able to speak with us. Thank you for your contributions, Black Robe, and everybody else who gave in their input and has been listening. And I really appreciate the audience. But I gotta go. Um, thanks and good night, guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's 9 p.m. We'll wrap the stream up. But I will say, of course, we could continue with free discussion and just go on as we were.
sure.
So yeah.
All right.
Peace.
Thanks, Spencer. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching the stream. I know some of you are confused because most of my viewers are American, and the odd ones
Yeah.
from Ontario who I still talk to because they're trying to help. All right.
Oh yeah, we talk to a lot of Easterners all the time. There are a lot of people that are sympathetic to our plight, that they're not happy with the way things have been going for a long time.
No, I found a lot more support from them than even from that Vancouver area. HMS seems kind of alone out there.
Yeah, no kidding. Vancouver and the mainland is like you can't find any allies there.
You go to them if you want a good debate.